On air, online, on demand. Watch AFR when you want, where you want with CN8, the Comcast network.
Hello, everyone. I'm Art Fennell. Thanks for joining us for The Report. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has made an historic ruling striking down a 32-year ban on handguns in Washington, D.C. In essence, the High Court says that it upholds the right to bear arms and says the Second Amendment applies not only to owning guns for the purpose of militia, but also to individuals for the purpose of self-defense. It is the most significant ruling on the Second Amendment since 1939. Now, here's how the voting breaks down. Justices Thomas, Roberts, Scalia, Alito, and the surprise swing vote of Justice Kennedy all voted to strike down the ban, while Justices Stevens, Breyer, Ginsburg, and Souter voted to uphold it. A reaction on this has come fast.
As mayor, although I am disappointed in the court's ruling and believe, as I said for the past year, that more handguns in the District of Columbia will only lead to more handgun violence, it is important to both respect the court's authority and then to act quickly. And today, I have already directed the Metropolitan Police Department to implement an orderly process for allowing citizens to register handguns for lawful possession in their homes.
Now, Senators John McCain and Barack Obama have had differing views on this case, but both had positive feedback to the court's ruling.
So the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Second Amendment, and obviously I'm very pleased about that decision. I had filed a brief along with 50-some other senators. Senator Obama had declined to do that. We had filed an amicus brief along with 54 other senators. So I'm pleased with that ruling.
I believe that the Second Amendment means something, that it is an individual right, and that's what the Supreme Court held, and so I agree with that aspect of the opinion. What I've also said is that every individual right can be bound by the interests of the community at large, and the Supreme Court agreed with that as well.
As we say, this is a big deal. Suzette Malveaux, our legal analyst and law professor at the Columbus School of Law, the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., is with me now to talk further about the Supreme Court's decision. Suzette, thanks for being here.
Hi, Art.
And let's start right from the top and talk about just what the justices decided and the implications of it.
Certainly. As you mentioned, the Supreme Court decided for the very first time that individuals have a right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment. And so this is an individual right, not a collective right. You don't have to be associated with the military or militia in order to own a gun for the purpose of protecting your family and your property in your home. So it's a huge decision.
And this is, people have been saying this is an historic decision, perhaps one of the most significant rulings on the Second Amendment since 1939. Do you see it that way? Why is it so historic?
I think they're right. I mean, I would go back even further and say that not only have we not heard from the court in about 70 years, but this is the very first time that the Supreme Court has interpreted the language of the Second Amendment really since its ratification in 1791. So it is monumental in terms of the court actually giving us a direct interpretation of that language to understand the conflict. Is this an individual right? Is a collective right? And it has come squarely on the side that this is an individual right, that we have a fundamental right that has been defined for us now. And so it's really an extraordinary ruling.
This obviously came down as a result of the strict law that was in place in Washington, D.C., but other cities, Chicago just to name one, have quickly followed suit in their outrage over the court's ruling.
That's right, and in fact there are a number of lawsuits that currently have been filed literally right after the ruling. You saw the NRA file lawsuits against Chicago and its suburbs, San Francisco, to look at some of their gun control laws and figure out whether or not they, in fact, are in compliance with the Second Amendment. So we can expect to see litigation across the country challenging state and local laws that are restricting people's access to own guns.
And let's talk about those restrictions, because basically this is not a green light to go out for anybody just to go get a gun, do whatever they want. There's still laws that are in place, and we should explain that a little bit.
That's right, Art. I think you make a really important point, and the court did the same thing. I mean, it's not like when we're now in the District of Columbia that this is going to be the wild, wild west and people will be, toting guns everywhere. There are really restrictions, and Justice Scalia made that clear in its opinion. He said this is no way changes laws that may have certain conditions upon which you can get a gun. We're not putting guns in the hands of felons. We're not putting guns in the hands of people who may be mentally ill. We are still able to keep guns out of schools, out of government buildings, and so forth. And so there's still criteria for owning a handgun. And the District of Columbia, they may be scrambling right now to kind of figure out what their laws are going to be, but by no means does it mean that this is a free-for-all.
And Suzette, what can we gather from the vote, the Supreme Court's vote, and how it came down, and who voted for it, who voted against it? What do we learn from that?
Well, it was a traditional kind of split, sort of conservative liberal split, the 5-4 decision, and so that was not entirely surprising. I think it is, it's an interesting conflict here in terms of just interpreting the Constitution. If you look at the text of the Second Amendment, the court is saying that it's clear on the face of the text, and also if you look at the framers, the history behind the Constitution, that there is this individual right as opposed to a collective right. It's huge because it does sort of change what we thought, at least for the last 70 years. Judges, academics all over the country had been saying it was a collective right, and it's not. So the court has really stepped out and completely changed our interpretation of the Second Amendment. So it's a very, very significant.
You think we've seen the end of it for now, or more to come?
I think there's more to come, actually. You can see litigation all over the country now challenging similar gun control laws in other states. And there's a sort of a thorny question that's still out there, whether or not state and local laws, in fact, even fall under the Second Amendment, whether or not the Second Amendment applies to them. And so this was kind of a funky case because it was the District of Columbia, so where we were dealing with a federal law as opposed to state law. So this is definitely going to go back before the Supreme Court.
All right. Well, Suzette Malveaux, thank you very much.
Thanks,
we always enjoy your insight on this and helping to break it down so we better understand it. And just want to give you this programming note. Be sure and stay with us, because Suzette will be with us again tomorrow and Wednesday, as we'll be talking about some other historic rulings from the Supreme Court, including decisions on the death penalty and detainee rights. That's this week right here on AFR. Hope you'll be watching.